Welcome back to Air Quality Matters and One Take. One Take, my take on a paper or report on air quality, ventilation and the built environment. One Take in that it's done in one take and tries to summarise for you a scientific perspective on something interesting in usually 10 minutes or less. Because who has the time to read all these amazing documents, right? This week, we're digging into a paper that speaks to an experience that has become almost universal over the last few years. The paper is titled Home as an Office, investigating the associations between indoor environmental quality, well-being and performance in work from home settings. And this is a fascinating one because it tackles a question we've all asked ourselves. What actually makes a good home office? Is it about having good air quality according to a sensor? Or is it more about how the space feels? Is it the ergonomic chair, the view out the window, or the fact that you can't hear your neighbours? This research dives right into that tension between objective, measurable environmental, and subjective lived experiences. So let's get into what they did. The researchers recruited 95 people who were working from home in the Vancouver and Seattle areas, and they used a really smart two-pronged approach. On one hand, they gave everyone a little desktop monitor, low-cost air quality sensor that objectively measured all the usual suspects of indoor environmental quality. We're talking about PM 2.5, total VOCs, CO2, temperature, humidity, and even sound levels. This gave them the hard numbers on the physical environment. But on the other hand, they did something just as important. They asked people, through a series of detailed questionnaires, they asked about their perceptions. Are you satisfied with the lighting? Do you have an ergonomic chair? Does noise from your family interrupt you? And crucially, they also measured outcomes using standardized surveys for things like psychological well-being, physical symptoms, and work performance. So the core question is, which of these two things, the objective data from the sensors or the subjective feelings of the occupants, is actually a better predictor of well-being and productivity when you're working from home? And here's the surprise, if you like, and really the headline finding of the paper. The data from the objective sensors, the actual measured levels of PM 2.5 and CO2 and so on, showed predominantly weak associations with how people felt or how productive they were. This is quite a big finding. It suggests that even if your CO2 levels are a bit high or your PM 2.5 is slightly elevated, in this study at least, it didn't have a strong direct link to the reported well-being or even the performance. Now, why would that be? The authors suggest a couple of reasons. First, the indoor environmental quality in most of the homes was generally pretty moderate to begin with. But more importantly, people have agency at home. In a corporate office, if you're cold, you often can't just go and change the building thermostat. At home, you can. If you feel the air is stuffy, you can open a window. People adapt their environment and their behaviour, and their ability to control things seems to weaken the direct link between what that sensor measures and how people actually feel. But when they look at the perception-based data, the subjective side of the equation, the story completely changed. And here they found much stronger connections. For instance, satisfaction with having ergonomic furniture, good daylight, and a nice workspace aesthetic were all strongly linked to positive well-being and performance outcomes. People felt good about their physical setup, felt better and worked better. The reverse was also true. Problems that people reported had a real impact. Things like unwanted interruptions from family members or noise from the street were strongly associated with lower psychological well-being. The study found that even something as specific as persistent kitchen odours was linked to lower vitality and a more depressed mood for people who reported it as a problem. So, what's the takeaway from all of this? The paper's core message, I think, is not that objective indoor air quality doesn't matter. Of course it does. especially at extreme levels. But it argues that in the context of working from home, our subjective experience of the space is a much better predictor of our well-being and performance than what a sensor might tell us. In a sense, the old cliche that perception is reality really holds true here. The feeling of being in control, of having a comfortable and aesthetically pleasing space, or not being constantly interrupted, these are not just fluffy nice to haves. The study shows they have a measurable, statistically significant association with our mental health and our productivity. This has really big implications. It challenges a purely engineering-led, sensor-driven approach to creating healthy buildings. It tells us that we can't just focus on hitting certain parts per million. We have to make a more holistic, human-centered approach. It means that when we design spaces for home working, we need to think just as much about ergonomics, acoustics, privacy, and personal control as we do about ventilation rates, for example. And I think, honestly, this could apply to many spaces. We were only just having this conversation with Chandra Sakar on the main podcast there in the last few weeks about what happened when they gave people agency and control of hot and humid spaces in that part of the world. This study validates that so many of us feel intuitively. It confirms that yes, that an uncomfortable chair really is stressing you out. And yes, the view out your window is actually making you a better worker. It's a powerful reminder that our built environment is not just a collection of physical parameters. It's a stage on which we live our lives, and how we feel on that stage matters profoundly. Thanks very much for listening. This has been this week's One Take. These podcasts are not possible without our sponsors, so thanks a million to them, Safe Traces and Imbiot. See you again next week.